You've probably heard of Islam, and it's the faith of nearly 2 billion people around the world. But for a lot of us, its core principles can feel like a bit of a mystery. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all the noise and try to understand the simple, foundational ideas that are really at the heart of the Islamic faith. Let's get right into it. So, first things first, let's just wrap our heads around this scale we're talking about. Over 1.8 billion people. That's across countless cultures and nations all over the globe. It's a huge, huge part of our shared human story. Okay, but a number that big can feel kind of abstract, right? It's easy to get lost in all the details. So let's ask the big question. What is Islam at its absolute core? What's the one single idea that holds it all together? Well, the answer starts with this really fundamental idea. Islam is described not just as a religion you practice on certain days, but as a complete way of life. Think of it like a framework that guides everything. Your beliefs, your character, and how you treat other people. And right at the very heart of that framework, pure, simple monotheism. The core Islamic belief is in one and only one God, known in Arabic, of course, as Allah. He's seen as the creator of everything, but just as importantly as the most merciful. That's a key part of the description. So what's the point of it all? What's the ultimate purpose of life? According to Islamic teaching, it's to worship God. But worship here means way more than just, praying. It's all about translating that faith into real, everyday action, living a life that's defined by goodness, by justice, and by compassion. Right, but for a complete way of life, you're gonna need some guidance, an instruction manual, if you will. And in Islam, that guidance comes from two main sources, a sacred book and the example of a prophet. Let's dig into how those two work together. And this is where things get really interesting, because there's this key dynamic at play. On one side, you have the Quran, which Muslims believe is the literal, direct word of God. On the other side, you have the Prophet Muhammad, whose life is seen as the living, breathing example of how to actually put those words into practice. So you got the divine message on one hand and the human application on the other. They're meant to work in perfect sync. So let's zoom in on the Quran for a second. Its preservation is a really central part of the faith. Muslims believe it was revealed over 2 decades, written down immediately, and has stayed exactly the same for over 14 centuries. And this is pretty amazing. To this day, millions of people continue that tradition of memorizing the entire book, word for word. All right, so what about the Prophet himself? What's really fascinating is that way before any of the revelation stuff started, he was already known in his community by a specific title, Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy. For Muslims, this is a huge deal. The fact that his reputation for integrity was rock solid from the very beginning. And that reputation really connects directly to what his mission was all about. You see, the Quran doesn't talk about him as some kind of conqueror or a mighty king. Instead, it describes him as a mercy to all mankind. That really frames his whole purpose as being about compassion and guidance, even when he was facing some really intense opposition. Okay, so you've got these core beliefs, you've got this guidance, but how does that actually translate into daily life? How do you live it? Well, it's all organized into this really clear framework, which you'll often hear called the pillars, the things that hold up the entire structure of a Muslim's faith and practice. First up, you have the 6 articles of faith. These are the core beliefs that really shape a Muslim's entire worldview. This includes belief in one God, his angels, his books, and his prophets. It also includes belief in a final day of judgment and in divine destiny or qadar, which is the idea that God has a plan for everything. So this is the why behind everything. It's the mental and spiritual foundation that drives all the actions. And if that was the why, this is the how. These are the 5 core practices that put all that faith into action. You got the daily declaration of faith and the 5 daily prayers, which really give structure to the day. Then there are annual things like giving to charity, which builds social responsibility, and the month of fasting, which is all about building empathy. When you put them all together, along with that once-in-a-lifetime pilgrimage to Mecca, these pillars are designed to build discipline and a powerful global sense of community. But wait, the framework doesn't just stop at those 5 big rituals. Actually, the teachers place a huge emphasis on your everyday character. And this is the key takeaway. Being honest, caring for the poor, standing up for what's right, these are just, nice to have. In Islam, they're considered essential acts of faith themselves. So, what happens when you take all of this, the beliefs, the practice, the character, and you put it all together? Well, the story we get is one of incredible transformation. Something that started with individuals and scaled all the way up to shaping entire civilizations. Just look at this timeline of the initial impact. The history tells us that pre-Islamic Arabia was a pretty chaotic place, full of tribal warfare and a lot of social injustice. Then, within just 23 years, that's the time period the Quran was revealed, that same society was apparently unified around a whole new set of principles: moral responsibility, justice, and equality. And this transformation wasn't just social. It also sparked this incredible intellectual tradition. For centuries, Muslim civilizations were at the forefront of science and learning. I mean, you have figures like Ibn Sina, a giant in medicine. You have Al-Khwarizmi, whose work in algebra rarely gave us the word algorithm. And don't forget the massive role scholars played in saving and building upon ancient knowledge from other civilizations. So, let's bring it all back home. If you were to boil it all down, you get a pretty simple summary. At its very heart, Islam is a faith that weaves together three things that you just can't separate: what you believe, how you worship, and who you are as a person, your character. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Still this incredibly powerful force in the lives of almost 2 billion people today. So the real question to think about is this: how does a message that's so ancient continue to shape our world, right here, right now?